Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling a story that's really been making waves in Brazil, focusing on politician Carla Zambelli.
That's right. And we've got quite a mix of source material here, a podcast transcript with some, let's say, strong views, a straightforward news report, and even a statement from Zambelli herself.
So our job really is to unpack all of this. We want to pull out the key pieces of information and understand the different stories being told.
Exactly. Just look at what the sources actually say and how they frame things. It's about navigating these different narratives.
Okay. And the main event everyone's talking about, covered in these sources, is Carla Zambelli leaving Brazil.
Uh-huh. And as you can see from the material, it's messy. Conflicting reasons, lots of opinions swirling around. Perfect stuff for us to dig into.
So let's start with the basics. The news report confirms she has left the country. That's fact number one.
Yes. And initially, that report mentioned the USA as the destination. Her lawyer confirmed that, according to the source.
Okay, so she's gone. What's the official line? Why did she leave, according to that news report?
Well, the official reason given by her lawyer is health treatment.
Health treatment. Seems simple enough on the surface.
Well, yes and no, because the source also includes her own description of this treatment, and it's a bit unusual.
How so?
She's quoted in the report describing it as non-medical. It's more about letting things flow and unlocking feelings.
Liking feelings, okay.
Yeah. She also says, again quoted in the news source, that she was feeling sick and ashamed back in Brazil. The implication seems to be that leaving is necessary to get sane again.
That's certainly a specific way to put it.
Yeah.
And the sources also mentioned she plans to take a leave of absence from Congress.
Correct. Citing constitutional allowances and, interestingly, referencing Eduardo Bolsonaro having done something similar in the past. That detail comes from her own statement.
Right. But this is where things get complicated, isn't it? Because you can't really talk about the health treatment without looking at the timing and her legal situation.
Exactly. The sources immediately bring up the legal context, which provides a pretty stark contrast.
So what are the key legal issues highlighted in the material we have?
Okay, the big one, the really recent development, is her conviction. She was just sentenced to over 10 years in prison.
Over 10 years. What was the conviction for?
The sources state it was for ordering a hacker to break into the National Council of Justice Systems, the CNJ,
Okay.
and the alleged goal: planting fake news about Minister Alexandre de Moraes, specifically during the 2022 election cycle.
Wow. And how did the authorities link it to her? How did that come out?
Oh, according to the source material, the hacker involved made a deal. He decided to cooperate with the justice system, presumably for a lighter sentence. And his testimony, as it's described or quoted in the source, was apparently quite direct. It was Zambelli.
Yeah, so the person she allegedly hired pointed the finger straight at her. That's a huge detail from the sources.
Absolutely crucial. And it's not the only legal issue mentioned. The sources also bring up another pending case.
This is the one from São Paulo, just before the election runoff in 2022.
That's the one. The incident where she pursued a man with a gun, a mão armada, as the source puts it, in the Jardins area.
Right. And the sources say that case hasn't been decided yet.
Not judged yet, no. But the sources use the phrase liberated for judgment, which suggests it's basically ready to go to court. All the preliminary stuff is done.
And didn't the news report add a bit more detail there? Something about who she was with?
It did. It mentioned she was accompanied by someone who apparently is a police officer. And that this person then, dispara a arma no meio dos jardins, fired the gun in this upscale neighborhood.
Firing a weapon in public. Okay, so you've got the stated reason for leaving health, unlocking feelings, right alongside a very recent 10-year conviction and this pending firearms case.
Yeah, the juxtaposition in the sources is pretty stark. It definitely creates some tension around the narrative.
Which brings us to Carla Zambelli's own take on it. We also have her video statement in the source material, where she offers her reasons.
And her framing is very different. She starts by saying, it's absolutely not an abandonment of the country.
So what is it, according to her?
She calls it an act to resist.
Resist. Exactly.
She claims she's being silenced. She talks about judicial pressure and describes the current situation in Brazil as a dictatorship, characterized by a lack of liberty and censorship.
So she's linking leaving the country directly to being able to speak freely.
Yes. She says explicitly she was getting sick for not being able to say what I think. It's very political framing.
And she used that phoenix tattoo analogy in her statement, didn't she?
She did, about needing to reinvent ourselves, rise from the ashes and shine again. It's clearly meant to portray resilience in the face of adversity.
It's a powerful image. But didn't her statement also contradict the initial news report about where she was going?
It did. The initial report, based on her lawyer, said the U.S. for treatment. But in her video, she says she'll be based in Europe.
Europe. Okay, that's a significant difference noted in the sources.
And from Europe, she says, she plans to denounce all the abuses happening in Brazil, taking her case to all the courts in Europe.
She also mentioned having European citizenship, right? Yeah. Adding that she felt very tranquila, calm, at ease about that.
Yeah, that detail's in there. And she also positions her actions alongside others she sees as fighting for Brazil's freedom. She names Eduardo Bolsonaro, Alan dos Santos, Lacombe, Paulo Figueiredo.
So putting herself in that company, framing it as part of a larger movement.
Precisely. So you've got these layers. The lawyer's health reason, the hard facts of the legal cases from the sources, and then her narrative of resistance against tyranny.
But the sources don't just present her perspective or the news perspective. They also show how this whole thing is being discussed and debated, right? The commentary aspect.
Oh, definitely. And that's where you really see the different tones clash. It's quite revealing.
You mean comparing the formal reporting style with the commentary in that podcast transcript?
Exactly. You take Daniela Lima's approach. As presented in the sources, it's very much by-the-book news reporting.
Citing G1, confirming with the lawyer, laying out the facts of the legal history.
Right. Presenting Zambelli's statements factually. The source even notes Lima implies some skepticism about the whole spiritual treatment thing, but within that formal structure.
And then there's Ricardo Dias in that podcast transcription.
Yeah. And his approach is the polar opposite. It's dripping with sarcasm, highly critical.
He doesn't pull any punches, does he? The transcript shows him mocking the health reason, saying she escaped or run away.
Suggesting she needed to find herself, or maybe she was just feeling sick of the justice system. Really pointed stuff.
And the transcript even includes him calling Daniela Lima names.
It does. Great rapper, Mortadella E. Anta. Pretty aggressive commentary captured there.
He also calls Zambelli an excellent actress, reacting to her video statement.
And his take on the hacker cooperating. Very blunt. The source says he used the phrase "cagotosila," basically, ratted her out.
And there was that reaction in the transcript to Lima mentioning the victim in the gun incident was black.
Yes, the transcript captures his sarcastic questioning of why that detail matters. What is the issue with the man being black, he asks, suggesting, would it not be news if he were white?
It's a very charged moment in the commentary.
Definitely. And his sign-off in the transcript is pure sarcasm, pretending to be relieved she's off to Europe to save Brazilian democracy, then immediately undercutting it by saying she's probably just saving her own skin.
So seeing these two approaches side by side in the sources, the factual reporting versus the intense, opinionated commentary, really highlights the different ways you, the listener, might encounter this story.
It shows how the same set of events can be framed in wildly different ways depending on the source's perspective and intent.
Okay, let's try to pull it all together then, based strictly on what these sources lay out for us.
We have Carla Zambelli leaving Brazil. Officially, it's for a unique kind of health treatment. According to her, it's an act of resistance against a perceived dictatorship.
But, and this is the big but from the sources, this happens right after she's convicted and sentenced to over 10 years in prison.
And while she's still facing another serious charge involving that armed pursuit, which is ready for trial.
So the sources really highlight this tension, don't they? Her claim of needing freedom to speak out from abroad.
Versus the fact that her legal problems, as detailed in the sources, stem directly from actions related to speech, spreading fake news, and alleged conduct like that gun incident.
The timing and the legal details presented in the sources certainly cast a different light on the health and resistance explanations.
They provide significant context that complicates those narratives.
And really, this exercise shows why digging into the source material itself is so important for you listening, beyond the headlines or a single commentary piece.
Great. When you look at the news report, Zambelli's own statement, and the commentary side by side, you get a much richer, albeit more complex, picture based on the information provided.
It helps you see the stated reasons, the reported facts, the different interpretations, all laid out in the material we examined.
It lets you weigh the evidence presented in the sources yourself and develop a more nuanced understanding than you might get from just one angle.
So, to recap from our sources, Carla Zambelli has left Brazil. Her lawyer cites health. She cites political resistance against oppression.
Yet the sources make it clear this happens immediately following a major conviction and with another serious charge looming.
And the way this is reported and discussed, as shown in the sources, ranges from formal news presentation to deeply sarcastic critique.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final question to ponder, based solely on the material we've dissected today.
Considering the sequence of events, the conviction, the pending case, the timing of her departure, as laid out in these sources, does Zambelli's exit seem primarily like an act of political resistance against perceived persecution?
Or does it appear, based on this information, more like a strategic move, potentially influenced by these significant legal consequences she's facing?
And maybe just as importantly, what does the stark difference in tone and focus between the sources tell us about how narratives around politics and justice are constructed and consumed? Something to think about.